How does all that you've said affect our ability to survive and to stay free in this world that is now in crisis?
Well, I think you touch upon a very important point here. Namely, we must make a decision of values. If our supreme value is the development of the Western tradition of a man for whom the highest thing in life is man, for whom love for man, respect for man, and the dignity of man are supreme values, then we cannot ask the question in the sense, if it is better for our survival, might we drop these values? If these are supreme values, and then they are there, and whether we live and we die, we shall not change these values. But if we begin to say, well, maybe we can cope better with the Russians if we also transform ourselves into a managed society, if we, as somebody put it the other day, train our soldiers to be like the Turks who have fought so bravely in Korea, if we are willing to change our whole way of life for the sake of so-called survival, then I think we do exactly that which threatens our survival. Because our vitality, as the vitality of each nation, rests on the sincerity and depth of the faith in the ideals which it announces or pronounces. I think our danger is that we talk one thing and we feel and act another thing.
How do you mean?
I mean, we talk about equality, about happiness, about freedom, and about the spiritual values of religion and about God, and in our daily life we act on principles which are different and partly contradictory.
All right, if I may ask you now to define. You mentioned equality, happiness, and freedom.
Well, I'll try. By equality, one once understood the equality in the very same sense in which the Bible speaks of equality, that we are all equal in as much as we are created in the image of God. Or if I don't use theological language, that we are all equal in the sense that no man must be the means for the purposes of another man, but each individual is an end in himself. Today, we talk a lot about equality, but I think what most people mean by it is sameness, that everybody is the same, and they are afraid if they are not the same, they are not equal.
And happiness?
Well, happiness is a very proud word of our whole cultural heritage. I think if you ask what people really mean by happiness today, it is the experience of unlimited consumption, the kind of thing Mr. Huxley has described in The Brave New World. Mm-hmm. I think if you would ask people what their concept of heaven is, and if they were honest, they would say it's a kind of big department store with new things every week and enough money to buy everything new. Happiness today, I think, is for most people the satisfaction of the eternal suckling to drink in more, this, that, and the other.
And what should happiness be?
Happiness should be something which results from the creative, genuine, intense relatedness, awareness, responsiveness to everything in life, to man, to nature. Happiness does not exclude sadness. If a person responds to life, he's sometimes happy and sometimes sad. What matters is he responds.
And the third was a democracy or freedom?
Well, it's all these words are used now rather indiscriminately. I would say democracy once meant organization of society in the state in which the individual citizen feels responsible and acts responsibly and participates in decision-making. I think what democracy means today in reality is to a large extent manipulated consent, not forced consent, manipulated consent, and manipulated more and more with the help of Madison Avenue.
Well now that we have stated the indictment, tell me, how did we get this way? What happened to us? Where did we get off the track, Dr. Fromm?
I think we got off the track, as many societies do, who follow successfully one aim and yet are not capable of seeing at what point the pursuit of this aim prevents them from following a more total aim. That is to say, they get into a blind alley. I think, to be specific, we got off the track when we concentrated more and more on production of things. Thereby, we created a split between intellect and emotion. Because in order to produce a modern technique, you have to use intellect. And we have created men who are very brilliant, who are very clever, but our emotional life has become impoverished.
Are you talking about capitalism? Is that...
Yes, I talk about capitalism, I talk about the industrial system as it has been created since 100, 200 years.
Yes. Well, now, would you suggest another system which would better fortify man, which would better understand and help man to realize himself?
Yes, indeed. I am a socialist. And, however, I have to add that what I understand by socialism is exactly the opposite of what many people, or most people today, mean by socialism.
Explain.
I understand by socialism a society in which the aim of production is not profit, but the use, in which the individual citizen participates responsibly in his work and in the whole social organization, and in which he is not a means who is employed by capital.
But he's going to be employed by the state, is he not, Dr. Fromm?
Yes.
Are you not putting the individual in socialism at the disposal of the state? Doesn't it devalue the individual?
Well, we must clarify one thing. Socialism, if the Russians claim they have socialism, this is just, I would say, a lie. They have no socialism at all. They have what I would call a state capitalism. Their system is the most reactionary, conservative system anywhere in Europe today, or in America for that matter. And actually, the ownership of industry by the state, that is not socialism. Actually, if you take a nationalized British industry, it is not different from Ford and General Motors as far the realistic situation of the work in the factory.
Well, then what is socialism? If that is not socialism, what is?
Well, I would say it is, to be quite specific, I see socialism in the direction of management of an enterprise by all who work in the enterprise. I would consider a socialism a mixture of the minimum of centralization necessary for a modern industrial state and a maximum of decentralization. I would have to say this, Mr. Wallace. We are terribly imaginative as far technique and science is concerned. As far changes in social arrangements are concerned, we lack utterly in imagination. If we would...
But Dr. Fromm, I keep thinking as you talk, we have been told that by certain persons that we have a creeping socialism now going on in the United States, and certainly it is a more socialistic country today than it was, let's say, 20 or 25 years ago. And yet, you yourself complain about bureaucracy. You yourself complain that the individual is losing his way in this state in which we live, and at the same time you call for more socialism. Aren't you just adding poison to the poison that is already being injected into our systems, if indeed socialism be poison?
Yes, but for me, socialism is exactly the opposite of a bureaucratically managed culture. We talk a great deal about Russia today, and I'm afraid that in 20 years, we and Russia will be more similar than different.
Why?
Because what is common to both societies is a development into a managed mass society with big bureaucracies, managing people. The Russians do it by force, we do it by persuasion. I appreciate the tremendous difference that we can express ideas without being afraid of being killed or imprisoned. But I think the Russians might do away with the terror in 20 or 30 years when they are richer and when they don't need these repressive methods so much. What we have in common is a mass man, a mass bureaucracy, and a manipulation of everyone to act smoothly, but with the illusion that he follows his own decisions and opinions.
So far, I personally, if I may express an opinion, go with you. But I find it difficult to go with your solution. I go with your diagnosis, but not to your cure, because I don't understand your socialism, I guess.
Well, you see, that is so difficult because the Russians have succeeded in one thing. They have sold the world the idea that they represent socialism and the ideas of Marx. And we have done the greatest service to their propaganda by agreeing that that's what it is. I would need much more time to explain that socialism in the humanistic democratic sense in which Marx meant it and which I understand by it, is exactly the opposite of a managed society managed by big bureaucracy. How this could be done, how individual responsibility can be aroused, can be created, that is a matter of social organization which would lead us into detail.
Where can those looking in tonight find out more about this?
Well, I have tried in one book of mine to describe this.
The Sane Society.
The Sane Society. I want to mention that Marx shares something, if you don't mind the comparison, with the Old Testament. It's many people talk about him, but nobody has read him. And in fact, there are very important writings of Marx which are not even translated into English.
So you suggest that we go to Dr. Erich Fromm and to Karl Marx?
Well, not exactly. I would be in very good company, though.
One final question, sir. In reading your Sane Society, and you only have, I'm sorry to say, a half a minute to answer this, I feel a certain despair in Erich Fromm about the future of the world.
Mr. Wallace, I feel worried, deeply worried, only about one thing, the possibility that we fall, that we cannot avoid an atomic war. And the only concern which I have today is that we have a policy, a foreign policy, which enables us to avoid a catastrophe which, if one understands it properly, is undescribable. Short of that, I have a tremendous faith in the possibilities of man which have shown in his past, and I believe if we avoid war, we shall be able to revive our real vision of life, but that we must see it, and therefore that we must be critical to where we are.
Thank you, Dr. Fromm, for coming and spending this time with us. Whether or not one agrees with his solution, Dr. Erich Fromm points to a pressing problem. As he sees it, America tends to worship machines instead of men. We seem to prefer success to sanity. A society that is politically free, says Dr. Fromm, should guard against this kind of spiritual enslavement. Till then, Mike Wallace, good night.